Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Alliances webinar series. The January 2016 webinar is Supportive Housing, Opportunities, Freedom, and Choices. We're very excited to have CSH's John Fallon and Stephanie Sideman with us today. This webinar is being recorded, so if you want to receive a copy of it because you'd like to experience it again, or maybe you have some folks who weren't able to experience it the first time, just let me know. Send me an email and I will send you out a copy. Everybody is going to be on mute except for our facilitator. This will help eliminate background noise. In order to communicate, though, please type in using the control panel, and your question, comment, or contribution will be read out loud. Now, if you don't want for your question, comment, or contribution to be read out loud, that's okay too. Just let me know when you type it in. So a little bit about the Alliance. We are a network of self-advocacy groups all around Illinois. You can see we're as far north as Zion and McHenry. We're down south in the Alton-Edwardsville area. We're over in Rock Island and Jacksonville. And we go all the way over to the east side in Champaign and Charleston, and several locations in the Chicago area. Self-advocates of our member groups, we work together to make things better in our communities and in our lives, because we know that we're a lot stronger when we work together. So our presenters today, Stephanie Sideman and John Fallon. John will be joining us in a little bit. He has a meeting right now, but we hope that he'll join us soon. I'd like to read this quote. This is from the Illinois Self-Advocacy Alliance position statement, and it says, "We want Illinois to create a disability service system where supports and services are controlled by us, the individuals who receive them. We want opportunities. We want freedom. We want choices." And because of that statement, we're really reminded that nothing about us without us. Self-advocates have said this for a long time. If you're going to plan for us, if you're going to talk about us, if you're putting things in place that you think are going to be better for us, you need to include us. Nobody knows us as well as we know ourselves. So in the spirit of everything we do, let's remember nothing about us without us. And so Stephanie, take it away.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm really delighted to have the opportunity to chat with you all today about supportive housing and spend some time together. And what I'd like to do first is ask you, what comes to mind when you hear the term supportive housing? Maybe you're familiar with what this looks like or have some thoughts about what it might be. And so I'd like to invite you to chat in anything that comes to mind when you hear supportive housing.
All right, so use that control panel to type in when you hear supportive housing, when you hear those words, or maybe you close your eyes and think of, what is supportive housing? What comes to mind? So what comes to mind when you hear supportive housing, or when you think about what supportive housing is? And I know everybody is just thinking and talking and getting ready to type their answers in. So we're waiting patiently to hear what you have to say.
That's right. Operators are standing by.
Well, at least two anyway.
At least two. Yeah.
So again, when you hear the word supportive housing, or you think about supportive housing, what comes to mind? And here we go. Oh, from excuse me, self-advocates of Lake County all the way up in Zion. When they hear supportive housing, they think support your parents. Interesting. Yeah, you know, a lot of times our parents supported us as we grew up, and sometimes we need to support our parents as well. So thank you for that. Another idea from Self-Advocates of Lake County, when they think of supportive housing, they think of low-income housing. From Livingston County Advocates in Action in Pontiac, they think group housing and support staff. So thank you, Livingston County Advocates in Action, for sharing that when you hear the word supportive housing, you think group housing and support staff. So who else has an idea out there? When you hear supportive housing, what comes to your mind? And we'll give you about another 15 seconds to chime in, and then we'll move on. So supportive housing. Sometimes we don't use these words when we talk about housing, so it may be a new term for many of you. Well, then let's continue on. So, Stephanie, what about supportive housing?
Yeah, and thanks so much to everybody for thinking about it. If you had the chance to type in a thought or just to take a moment to think about it. One thing that's really important to know about supportive housing is that it's housing for a person that they can afford, that they would like to live in. And so it's not something that people are instructed into, but more so offered. And it's specifically for people who need support. And supports can come in all different kinds and shapes and sizes. So the group that had said, sometimes my parents need supports, that could be true too. We all might need supports. And so this is affordable housing in the community. And for the group that had thought, maybe this sounds like it could be group housing, I want to mention that a lot of housing out there is group housing. So that was a really good guess. And the biggest difference between supportive housing and group homes is that in supportive housing, you can live in your own home, just you, or you could live with others if you wanted to have a roommate of your choice. But it's not on its own group housing because it could be just for one person who does not wish to have roommates.
And as you were sharing that, Stephanie, we did have Self-Advocates of Lake County chime in with some other thoughts on what supportive housing is. And it's something that you mentioned, houses with personal assistance and living on your own with staff support. Great.
Oh, that's fantastic. That was a really clear way of defining living on your own with supports. That's an excellent, very articulate definition.
And we all need support in order to live.
Yes.
So tell me when you'd like me to switch slides.
Oh, go ahead. That'd be great.
All right.
We also heard from you that you had thought this sounds like it could be low-income housing, and that's a great thought. Supportive housing by nature is affordable, and it can be that it is affordable because the rent is set at a rate where you have enough money to pay for your rent, or it could be that it is affordable because there's a subsidy, and a subsidy means that whatever the total amount of money that the housing costs is going to be, there's something that's going to pay for either a portion of that or all of it. So just to give you an example of what a subsidy might look like, and sometimes I think Section 8 is the most commonly known subsidy. So for example, if a person living in their own home has about $600 a month in income, that's about how much money they have every month, it wouldn't be affordable if their home costs $500 of their $600. They wouldn't have too much money left over for all of the other things you need spend money on, like food and all kinds of other needs. So a subsidy would make it so that the rent or the amount of money you pay for housing would be $200 a month, and the rest of it would be paid for by this subsidy. So if you think of a Section 8 voucher where a person doesn't have to be responsible for the total amount of money for housing because there's help, that's just one way of thinking about how this can become affordable. The next key point is that tenants have a lease. And I wonder if anyone who's participating has a lease or has had a lease. And if that might be the case, if you wouldn't mind chatting in, that would be wonderful to know. Perhaps if you live in your own home now, you do. And for those of us who don't have a lease, I just want to comment that this is the kind of agreement where you don't have to do any specific type of services to live in your housing. You just need to keep up your housing to live in your housing. And your services are different so that you still have the supports you need, but they're not tied to if you can or can't live where you want to live. They're just added on. So just to give an example, a lease might say it's important to note that this building has quiet hours starting at 11 p.m., so you might not want to have a big party at midnight because that might wake everybody up. But a lease would never say, you need to go to day program to stay here because that's separate. And so kind of on that same line of thought about services, all the services are voluntary, meaning a person in supportive housing should be offered the kind of supports they want and need, but it's up to you of what are those supports. So if you're not in need of a certain type of group because that's not interesting to you, you would just be offered, but you wouldn't have to do that. And really, one of the key components is that people are as integrated into the community as possible. So people with disabilities live side by side with people without disabilities because we're all stronger and better for having neighbors with all different kinds of strengths. So that's a little bit more about what is supportive housing.
And nobody chimed in saying that they have a lease currently where they live or they've had a lease in the past. So I think we'll go on to the next slide.
Mm-hmm. So if you stop and think for a moment, when I picture myself living in a home where I want to live, what does that look like? You might think about all of the things you might like nearby. So you might like to be really close to a bus line if you're not someone who drives, or you might like a parking space if you are someone who drives. If you are currently working or volunteering or part of a class or in a group or doing something that's meaningful to you, you'd want to be able to get to whatever that is during the day. And if you're not working but you'd like to be working, you certainly would want to live near places where you could find employment. Nobody wants to travel an hour to get to work. That's pretty difficult. Also, you know, it might be really important to you that you're very close to a grocery store or that you're on the bus line to the movie theater because you love movies or something like this. So one thing that's really critical when thinking about where do you want to live is what does that housing look like itself, and is it a place that is, you know, accessible and homey, but also what is it near? And so those are just a few things to think about when you think about if you're living in a place that you might not live in for your entire life, what should your next place offer you? And then someone had mentioned earlier, very eloquently, about the supports that could be needed. And the idea is that you shouldn't have to go somewhere for supports unless you want to, but the supports can come to you in your home.
All right. And while you were sharing about that, we have a self-advocate in the Pontiac area who does have a lease. And
Oh,
part of the lease says that there's no smoking and no pets allowed in his apartment. So it does outline some of the things that you can do and some of the things that you can't do. It's also located near downtown, so it's easy for him to walk to places which he enjoys. Thanks, Brian, for sharing that.
that's great, Brian.
Yeah, awesome.
So sometimes the best way to think about what something is to be really conscious of what it isn't. So just want to point out that supportive housing isn't treatment. It isn't um, a place you check into just to get a specific kind of help and then check out of. And it's not transitional. It's not as though you go into supportive housing to get to the next place. It's your home where you live. You can live there as long as you'd like. You can move if you don't want to still live there, but you would be the one to determine every year when it's time to sign the lease, am I happy in my home? Am I happy with my location? You know, Brian might say, and I don't mean to put words into your mouth, Brian, but it's possible he might say, yeah, I like my home. It's near what I need. I enjoy it. I'll go ahead and sign the lease again because this is working out for me, and that could happen for a long period of time. And it's really important to note that it's not a group home. So it isn't the kind of place where you would move in without knowing who the roommates would be too well, because if you had a roommate, you would have decided to have one. And it isn't the kind of place where we all go to the same thing at the same time because that's what's happening today. Since the services are different from housing, if you did have a roommate, you wouldn't need to also go to work with them or go to the same kind of social experience they're going to unless you chose to. Um, and the big idea there, of course, is person-centered planning and options for daily activities that are of interest to each individual, but not arranged for a group. And that usually allows people to have a lot more choice about what they want, because you don't have to compromise with a group. It really can be, what do you want to do? So those are just some examples of what supportive housing is not.
All right. And we have, oh, here's something, a question for maybe later in the presentation. Is there financial assistance for someone to be able to live in supportive housing?
Great question.
All right. So we're going to keep that one in mind.
Yeah, and just to give a teaser to later, the answer is going to be yes. Um, but we'll come back to that. But thank you so much for asking, because
Yes.
uh, housing isn't necessarily affordable without help.
Right.
But supportive housing by nature must be affordable. Um, so another key thing to think about with housing is that it can look very different. It can look very different in Zion than Rockford than Pontiac, right? So it can be a house, um, such as single-family homes in a neighborhood. It can be an apartment. Um, you know, if you own the apartment, it can be a condo, right? Um, and it can be new buildings that are currently under construction in Illinois or that will be built in the future that will have a portion of the building um, set aside for supportive housing. Um, and sometimes buildings are rehabbed to become nicer. They're fixed up, and as as the group fixing up the building is making plans for what to do with it, um, you know, there are opportunities to integrate supportive housing into that development. So Christine had mentioned the alliances all over the state, for example, in the Alton and Edwardsville area. And if there's anyone on the line that's familiar with or from Edwardsville, you may know of a building that's called the May Building, which has both rehab on one side where it was fixed up and new construction on the other side. And it's affordable because it is subsidized. Um, and there are self-advocates moving into their own apartments in this building in Edwardsville. just to give one example of what it could look like. But some of us are from towns that apartment buildings are not so common, and so it might be more appropriate for supportive housing to be houses.
Okay. So there's some pictures here of some single family homes that may well be supportive housing. I mean, we don't know the people who live in these homes, but supportive housing by definition can be a single family home. And then there's apartments and mixed apartments. So again, you might not know who all's living in an apartment building, and that's the beauty of supportive housing, that we just kind of all live together. We're all mixed up in a community and sharing our gifts and talents with others. All right. So what about some housing preferences?
Yeah, and if people are feeling chat friendly, I would just invite you, there's a list in front of you of different kinds of preferences that people sometimes say are of interest to them when they think about housing. And I would encourage you to chat in. Is there something that's important to you when you think about housing? And if you're willing to type that into the chat space so that we can hear your thoughts, that would be terrific. And while you're doing that, just to give you a couple of ideas, for some people it's really important to be close to an amenity that interests them, or to be able to have a pet, because in some cases you can, and other cases you can't, and you might not want to live somewhere where you can't if you wish to have a pet or you already have one. And just to give one other example, storage can be really important to people. What does the closet space look like? Where will I put all of my belongings? What if I collect more belongings? That kind of thing. So those are just some thoughts. But if you're willing to chat in, what matters to you when you think about housing that you might live in the future? That'd be great.
All right, and people are already sharing. So from Self-Advocates of Lake County, someone shares they'd like to live near a grocery store or a drug store to be able to get their shopping done and get their medications with ease. Wow, keeping the house clean, that's important. I'd want to live with a roommate who had the same kind of ideas as I had about cleanliness, or if I was in an apartment building, I'd want to make sure that the apartment buildings kept clean and well maintained. All right, we have another one from Self-Advocates of Lake County. I'd like to have pets, so making sure that pets are allowed is a preference. From Pontiac, Livingston County Advocates in Action, a place that's close to work, close to community activities, nice neighbors, and a safe neighborhood is very important. Oh, and here's a question that a self-advocate has. Why do some places not allow pets? So let's put that back out there to everyone. What are your ideas on why some places don't allow pets? You guys have great ideas and great skills and knowledge, so why don't you answer that one? Why do some places not allow pets? All right, and here's some, here's some great ideas. Some people might be allergic. Sometimes pets shed, and that requires a lot of cleanup, and sometimes pets may damage property, which makes the landlord have to repair things, and sometimes that gets costly for a landlord. So those are some reasons why places might not allow pets. I know that one person shared with me one time, having laundry facilities nearby is very important. If not in the building itself, then very close. The person did not want to be carrying their dirty laundry in a large laundry hamper down the road to get it done. They'd like to have that nearby. Oh, here's some other ideas. Someone said they'd like a place near friends and family. Awesome. All right. What a lot of great ideas for housing preferences.
Yeah, I think those are terrific ideas, and it's so important to know what you want, um, and to know if you're living in an environment that is what you want, or if you're planning for the future. And like, for example, if you might be living with family members but don't plan to always live with those family members, or if you might be living in a group home or know someone who is, but they would be happier in their own home, it's just good to know what does that mean exactly in terms of what opportunities can they consider. And so for me, it's most important that that people know what supportive housing is, so that people can ask for it if it's what they want. And so I just wanted to spend a minute on the topic of asking for it, because that's such a huge part of this process. And Christine, maybe you'll help me a little bit with this too if I fumble.
Okay.
But if sometimes people create a plan, and they might be waiting for services such as part of the PUNS list but not yet selected, or they might have been selected and might be receiving a service, not the one they'd like forever and ever. And as you're creating a plan, you'd want to work with your local independent service coordination agency to work towards a housing solution that works for you. And so I sometimes say independent service coordination agency, and that doesn't sound right because people think of the name of theirs and not what those are all called.
Okay.
And so, Christine, could you help me with naming what are some of the agencies in the areas where people on the phone are from?
Oh my goodness, I bet they could help me out with this. So there are many PASS or ISS agencies in the state of Illinois, and that's the gateway. They're kind of the gatekeeper to getting services. I know in my neck of the woods, it's called DDS of Metro East. In other neck of the woods, it might be called Access Services. It could be Great Rivers, ISSA. But who are your service coordination agencies in your areas? So if you're in the Zion area or in the Pontiac area, or if you're at South Star, who is your independent service coordination? So just give us a name. Who do you go to? Who's the gatekeeper for services? And we'll give folks a chance to chime in. All right, and here they come. All right. Up in the Zion area, it's CAU. That's the Independent Service Coordination Unit.
Yeah, it is community. I think that's Community Alternatives Unlimited.
Exactly. Yeah. All right, thank you. All right, in Livingston County, or it probably covers several counties, in the Pontiac area, it's IHR. And I'm not sure what IHR stands for, so we're starting to talk in some alphabet soup now, which our self-advocates and staff like me have said, let's not talk in alphabet soup. So Livingston County Advocates in Action, can you just share with us what IHR means? There you go. Thank you so much. Alphabet soup no more. Illinois Human Resources. All right, thank you. All right, so those are some examples of service coordination agencies.
Yeah, thanks everyone for chiming in. Those are excellent examples. And I'm willing to put money down that if you're in an area where you're not sure who that might be, that the Alliance would help you
Absolutely.
navigate. Yes, absolutely. And so going to your independent service coordination agency, and if that's like any of the examples that were just offered or who's ever nearest to you, and saying, for my plan, I would like supportive housing, if that is what you would like, or coaching others to ask for supportive housing if that is what they would like, because they'd like affordable housing, that they live in their own home, and if they have a roommate, it's because they chose that roommate, allows that agency to put you on a list for that type of intervention. And there are two different lists. Some people can be on both, and some people can just be on one. So I'd like to mention both of them, and they both are for supportive housing. And one of them is called the Statewide Referral Network. And to be part of the Statewide Referral Network, you just need to be a person who has a disability. And so any person with a disability could go to their independent service coordination and join that list. And then when there is an affordable housing opportunity in an area that you said you might like to live in, you would be contacted to be offered a tour of that housing option. So for example, if there's an apartment building and they have a rental unit that would be set at maybe $200 or $300 a month, or set at an affordable rate, and your name comes up next on the list, then you would come for a tour, see if it is near what you want, if it is on the bus line, if it is by your employment, if it is an area that you feel safe in, and all of those things. Does it allow pets? You'd have a chance to ask all of those questions. And then if you liked it, you would go ahead and they'd help you sign a lease and move in. And the second list is for a program called Section 811, which is kind of like Section 8. But Section 811 is specifically targeting LIGIS class members. So if a person is on the PUNS and selected for services, they could opt into this list, which is, again, it's subsidized housing. So you'd have a voucher, and you would put that voucher in a unit where you want to live. And the first one doesn't require that you've already been pulled from the PUNS list and receiving services. And the second one does, which is why some people can be on both lists. And I just want to comment that if you're translating this to friends 4 months from now, and it's hard to remember because I personally, from 1 month to the next, lose track. I have already forgotten what IHR stands for. So I just want to mention that if you should not quite remember what all of the lists are called, really the key point is that your independent service coordination agency could help people with disabilities go ahead and get on a waiting list for supportive housing, which would be made affordable to them. So I'll stop there for a minute in case there are any questions or any comments, any thoughts.
So as the screen says, we know that housing is the beginning. It's the beginning of a lot of things for a lot of people. It can be a jumping off point to the rest of people's lives. Sometimes we have it backwards, where people think housing is the end of everything I need. And we'd like to turn that around a little bit, that it's the beginning of a whole new life. And new opportunities and new experiences. So if we could, while people are chiming in, learn from some experts. So would you like to share about this, Stephanie, or would you like me to?
Yeah, you know, Christine did such a beautiful job leading a seminar. I hope some of you were there. If you weren't, I hope we do this again. It was so fun, where people created a collage. And if you weren't there, it turns out it's just never too late to make a housing collage. It usually just takes finding some magazines with pictures in it, or if you don't like to scrap, you know, you could always take some markers and draw. And this person made a supportive housing collage that demonstrated a few things that were really important to them. So you can see there's a cat right in the middle. So this person is not living somewhere. Oh, I should mention there's a dog on the other side of the monster truck. This person finds pets to be enjoyable and affirming and supportive, and wouldn't want to live somewhere where that's not quite an option. it seems like this person needs parking, or maybe likes to watch IndyCar. I'm not sure, but definitely transportation, I think, is well represented with this beautiful truck. I see entertainment represented in this collage. I don't know if any of you have a dual video and CD player, the VHS tapes, or if you have a video from when you were a kid and you wonder how could you play it. Well, this person found a device that could play anything.
There you go.
So I think they're technologically savvy, and it's a very nice looking kitchen, very homey. So they want to be able to work at home, so I'm sure they need a desk and Wi-Fi internet. So those are just a few examples of what mattered to this person when they were thinking about housing. And then
here's someone else who shared about housing, and his cats are very important to him. So Stephanie, I believe he already lives in supportive housing.
He does.
Yeah, and that's something he'd like to continue to do, and making sure that his housing is such that he can have pets.
Yeah, and one thing he shared, and I know it's a message that he would like shared with others, was that when he first said he would like to live in his own home, he was told, no, I don't think you can. I don't think you've ever done that before, so therefore I don't think you can. And he was very insistent that just because he had never been given the opportunity didn't mean he couldn't with the right supports, and he very beautifully advocated for himself. A few times he was told, well, you can live in this group home, and there are many people that he works with who do and who love that, but he personally didn't want to. That was just his preference. And so his story shows that if someone says no, we don't really have to take that as no. We have to just take that as an opportunity to educate that person of all of the things that we are capable of.
Yeah, and we do tell people, we have told people in the past, I won't do it anymore, but we have told people in the past, you've never done that before, and I don't think you'd be successful. Well, we don't know if we're going to be successful at something we've never done. We deserve the opportunity to try and the support to be successful with it. Here's another person. This is Chris, and he did a supportive housing collage of the things that are important to him. And when Stephanie was mentioning the May building in the Edwardsville area that is going to be opening up for some supportive housing opportunities, Chris is going to be taking advantage of that supportive housing opportunity. So he'll be living in a community in which he's already familiar, near a bus line, near family and friends. It's also near a grocery store and shopping and entertainment, and there'll be other people he knows living there. So he's very excited. His parents are very excited for that opportunity. And how about this one, Stephanie?
Yeah, Julie and Courtney at Speak Up and Speak Out shared a collage that they had each created, and this one is Julie's collage. And these ladies are also planning to move into the May building in Edwardsville, so they'll be neighbors with Chris. And Julie was sharing a few elements of her collage that are important to her. She would like a little bit of support with cooking, so she was showing how there are all these things that she would like in her home, and also a few areas where she would like a little support so that she can really enjoy living in her home, like making meals. And she's a runner, and so it's really nice for her that she's living near a track, a path, I should say, where she can run on. And so those were just a couple of things they had shared at a Speak Up and Speak Out activity.
Yes. So let's hear from you. Again, what are the things that are important to you? We kind of talked about them. What would you look for in supportive housing? So if you could do a collage right now, what pictures would you look for to put on that collage that represent your wants and your dreams as it relates to housing. So again, if you were to do a collage right now, what pictures would you put on it? What pictures as it relates to supportive housing? And I know everybody's thinking and talking, and they're getting ready to type in their contributions and comments.
The anticipation is building.
I know. I heard from one self-advocate one time they wanted to live in an apartment complex that had a pool. Now, I'm not sure that a pool on a day like today would be good unless it's an indoor pool. But I think living in an apartment complex that had a pool would be really nice in the summer. All right. Oh, from Self-Advocates of Lake County, someone says they'd like a place that had nice, clean windows. I like that. I want to see outside. I want to see what's going on out there. Another person said, I'd like to have a nice bedroom. All right. Yes, Megan is reminding me that there is a self-advocate we know named Terry, and he'd like to live on a houseboat. And I'm not sure if we could do some supportive housing on a houseboat, but that might be something to consider. Another person,
maybe if the boat could be docked so that the support staff doesn't have to row out there.
Or swim, yeah. Another person said having pets is very important, and that's something that they would put on their collage. Someone from Livingston County Advocates in Action, having a clean kitchen. That's where if you're going to have a roommate, making sure that it's a roommate that shares the same values that you have. It could be like, the odd couple. One person's a neatnik and the other person's a little bit of a slob. Although somehow they got along together okay, but, making sure that, again, if you want to have a roommate, that roommate, that you're compatible. I wouldn't want to be cleaning up after someone all the time. All right. So you talked a little bit earlier, Stephanie, about finding supportive housing.
And I jumped the gun. Here's that slide.
No, that's okay. Sometimes we need a review of this information.
Yeah, I think I was so excited. I forgot it was upcoming. But yeah, someone had mentioned earlier about, is this affordable? And so this slide is looking at how it can be made affordable, even if it's not just already affordable. And so, some of the ways that it can be made affordable is through the Section 811 program. And again, that is for people who are on the PUNS, the State of Illinois PUNS list, and they either have been pulled for and invited to have services, or who will be pulled in the future from that list and offered services. And sometimes people are offered, would you like to live in this group home? And you might really love to live in that group home. But if you would not like to live in the group home, you could say, oh, no, thank you, I'd like supportive housing. And then that's what the Section 811 program does. And then there are local public housing authorities. One quick tip I want to offer is that sometimes your local public housing authority says, oh, we're all full, we're not taking any names right now. And it turns out that's generally true, but not for persons with disabilities.
Oh,
so
I'm going to put myself on mute while the dogs chime in.
Yeah, your pets want to be part of the conversation.
Yeah, they're not using the control panel to type.
No, that's okay. And so one thing I always just suggest to everyone is that if you were to call your local public housing authority to see, do they have affordable housing? If you happen to have a disability, I would strongly recommend mentioning that, because sometimes there are lists that are only for persons with disabilities that other people can't be part of. And so there might be additional opportunities made available to you. And the statewide referral network, which is affordable housing across the state, just requires a disability. If any of you have ever met a woman by the name of Lori Baker from the governor's office, then you would know the person who creates all of the matches for the statewide referral network. And what she does is she looks to see where is there an affordable housing unit and where is there a person in that area who would like that. And the way to be part of that list, also with Section 811, is, of course, going to your independent service coordination agency. And then one other thing I would just mention is that sometimes housing is affordable because you can afford it and not because there's a subsidy. Like, for example, if you and a roommate got together, if you and a friend wanted to live together, you might find that with your incomes you could afford a unit, or if you had a little help, or you have enough of an income just on your own, you could afford it. And it would just be a question of having the right supports come in to be available to you, either through home-based or community-based funding. So there could be a lot of different ways to explore how to have your own supportive housing, how to live in a home you want to live in with the right supports. And this is just a list to point out some of those ways.
All right, I did have a couple of questions. The first is, do any of these assist a person in finding a personal support worker? So do any of the programs that help with finding supportive housing also help with a self-advocate finding a personal support worker?
That's a really great question. And the answer is most of the time they do not help find the specific worker. Typically what would happen is that the Independent Service Coordination Agency would help provide names and resources or an agency in the area to go to for this kind of support in finding who you'd like, for example, if you'd like to hire someone. But I'll just use the statewide referral network as an example because that's probably our largest example so far. In that case, it's up to the person to find the supports, and the statewide referral network offers the affordable housing, and then you wind up putting them together. So oftentimes, if it's difficult to find someone, requires going to a local agency to ask for help.
Okay, there's another question. We have an individual who is from outside of the U.S. Is there supportive housing assistance outside of the U.S.? They may be moving back.
Oh, wow, that's a great question. I'm so sorry that I'm completely unfamiliar with territory outside of the U.S. to know. Would you like to share the country?
All right. So if that's something that you are familiar or not familiar, if that's something that you are okay with sharing, they are from near Russia.
Wow, and they're moving back. Okay,
When you say, well, let me just ask for clarification. When you say moving back, are they moving back to Russia or are they moving back to the United States? So just so I know, they're moving back to Russia. Okay, so do we know of any supportive housing options in Russia?
Yeah, I'm so sorry to say I don't. It's such a good thing for them to look into, but I'm so sorry I don't know.
How interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting.
So what are some next steps that self-advocates can take as they maybe think about supportive housing?
Well, I think anyone who's willing to spread the message, I'd be most grateful to you, because I find that many people don't know this is something that they can ask for. And because people don't know they can ask for it, it tends not to be something made available to folks. And we're really towards the very beginning of a statewide pilot project and effort to help people who want to live in their own home get connected. But awareness raising is just such a huge part of that. So please, please consider telling others about this, even if they might not use that information immediately, just so that people know. If you're willing to just tell a friend, that would be really helpful. And if this is of interest to you, it would be so great if you would tell others what you would like with your housing, both your family, your friends, if you're part of any groups, if you have any staff or workers, helpers, anything like that. The more you can spread the message of what you're planning for, I think the more assistance you may have with those plans, which could be helpful. And, you know, Christina has taught me a lot about what it means to build a group of allies and really be in community with others. And so I think as part of raising awareness, if it's of interest to you, start to think about who in your life could help you with thinking this through and moving into supportive housing someday, and bring them on board. Share with them why this is important to you. Educate them about what supportive housing is, and those would be some fantastic first steps.
And for those self-advocates out there participating, remember back in the day we talked about cheerleaders. Who are your cheerleaders? Who are the people who cheer for you in your life? Those are exactly the people that you want to help build a support network for you as you perhaps take the journey into supportive housing. So share your dreams with your dream cheerleaders. So how do we build this support network in our community?
Yeah, it's such a good question. You know, we find that people knowing that this exists is a really good start. People asking for supportive housing so that it can be documented that there's an interest helps to create more resources for people. And we started the program today with Christina had said, nothing about us without us. And sometimes people think that folks really actually all want to have roommates, or folks might be lonely if they lived in their own home, or something that could be true, but it also could not be true. So for self-advocates who would like to live in their own home with supports, to go ahead and make that known will really bring the us back into nothing about us without us. And so I think that the people who are moving into the May building are going to be willing to share their story. And just to mention, we're going down with video cameras, and we're going to put together a video to share their story. And I think that kind of a tool, once we have it, we'll distribute it widely. Like, that might be one way of passing something from yourself to a friend or an ally, just showing the video of what supportive housing is. And when you move in, you might be willing to share your story as well, which will also just help spread the word.
All right. And so here's some other ways that we can help build a support network in our communities.
Yeah, and I'm wondering if anyone on this call is on social media, if that might be Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or anything like that. Because if you're on social media and you use the hashtag supportive housing, in any comments that you might like to share with the world, then we could all be promoting this in a way that is also part of a group conversation, because people can also search for that hashtag supportive housing and see what you have to say. So I like the social media tip on this slide, and I support that 100%. And I probably skipped right past it, but I think that first point is pretty terrific too, in terms of just the kinds of things you were thinking about what you would like in housing, and planning and thinking of what you need the housing to look like and what you need the supports to look like, can really help define if you have a housing intervention that's appropriate for you, or if you might need something different in the future.
All right. So we're looking at what was the old way of doing things in terms of housing, and what's the new way?
Yeah, and this idea of a roommate finder system, I'll just mention that there's a group up in northern Illinois that found somebody very technologically inclined who offered to make an app, and it's a roommate finder app for adults for self-advocates, and they're just in the beginning stages of looking at how to create this, but their goal is to make a statewide app to help people find someone to live with if they'd like a roommate in supportive housing. And in between now and that app being created, I do think it's a great idea to look at how we can help each other if we live together or if we don't become roommates, how we can help each other and be each other's allies in this adventure.
It is an adventure.
It is.
So does anybody have questions, comments, or considerations that they would like to share? Again, questions about supportive housing, comments, or considerations. Use your control panel to type those in. Again, this is being recorded, so if you want to experience the webinar again because, oh my goodness, I had to leave to go to the washroom or to get a drink and I missed part of it, you can let me know and I can send you a recorded copy. Or if there were self-advocates who were unable to be on the webinar, you can share the recording with them. So again, questions, comments, or considerations? And I know people are talking and they're thinking and they're typing, and it'll be only a moment until our questions, comments, and considerations come across the lines. Stephanie, I have a question for you. When you think of supportive housing, what excites you the most?
Oh, for me, what's so exciting is choice. It's really important to me that everyone has options for housing and to have a choice about where you would live, if you want to have a roommate or not, who that roommate would be that you pick if you'd like, what kinds of things do you want to do during the day. It doesn't have to be what everybody else is doing. Choice, really, and freedom stand out to me as the most important ideas with supportive housing.
Awesome. And I do have a question. We talked about what self-advocates can be doing, but would you offer a couple ideas? We do have some providers on the webinar as well. So we have staff members on as well as self-advocates. So what can staff or what can providers be doing to help people understand options as it relates to supportive housing?
That's a great question, and I think staff are such an integral part of this because staff can really help self-advocates know that they have options and explore what would the self-advocate like. And if it's living in their own home, they certainly can help them to become part of the statewide referral network waiting list, or if they're have been pulled from PUNs to receive supports. Perhaps they might be receiving home-based supports, living with family, but they'd like to go ahead and live in the community. And that home-based support can be transferred to an enhanced intermittent SILA support, which could be 12 hours a day if needed. It's really a much more flexible intervention than intermittent SILA is sometimes thought of. And so for staff to help people think about if they'd like to transfer to that intermittent SILA, and if so, to help them be part of the Section 811 pilot project would be really particularly helpful, as well as I think we all, self-advocates, staff, allies, I think we all can advocate for additional supportive housing options, because I think there will be people who would like this if only they knew it was an option. So I think partnering together to advocate with DDD that this is something that really should be made available as a choice to everyone statewide would be helpful. And I'll just mention that I work for CSH, and if there are staff on the phone who'd like to explore other options of what their agency can do, please contact me and we can talk offline. And if there are self-advocates who want to keep in touch, that's our contact information as well. We'd love to keep in touch.
All right, so on your screen, you see the contact information for John, who wasn't able to be on the webinar today, and for Stephanie, who was, their website, as well as their Facebook page. I know Stephanie talked about social media, and I know many self-advocates out there are on Facebook. I'm friends with many of them, which is very exciting because I get to see what's going on in their lives and get to celebrate and support that way. Our Alliance contact information, you can contact Megan Norland, Tara Wicki, myself, Christine Beck, or Leanne Roth at the email addresses listed. We also have our website and our Facebook page. So find us and like us on Facebook. Also find CSH Illinois and like them on Facebook as well. So if anybody has any closing comments, questions, or contributions, you have about 30 seconds to share those with us. Any last thoughts, Stephanie?
Oh, I just want to thank you so much for this opportunity, and I really want to thank everyone who joined in this webinar today to be part of this conversation. I really appreciate the chance to connect with you.
All right. Well, I don't have anyone typing anything in. So with that, thank you everyone for joining us for January 2016 Alliance webinar titled Supportive Housing, Opportunities, Freedom, and Choices. Thank you so much. I hope everyone has a wonderful day. Bye-bye.